Thanks very much indeed, Mike. The line of Peter's "just shoot me" rather reminds me of my aunt, who also died of Alzheimer's, and in her lucid moments, her version of the "just shoot me" was, look, just put me out of my misery, throw me off the gap, which... I don't know, I thought I was going to get a go. The thought of throwing someone off the gap was a challenging idea. Anyway, look, we've got to sort of rev things up a bit now because we've got two more speakers and time is trickling away. Jane Caro is our next speaker. Jane runs her own communications and consultancy agency and lectures in advertising creative at the School of Communication Arts at the University of Western Sydney. She's authored 2 books, The Stupid Country, How Australia's Dismantling Public Education, and The F Word, How We Learn to Swear by Feminism. In addition, she's recently published her first novel, Just a Girl, which has been longlisted for an Inky Award. Jane is sought regularly and appears regularly on radio and television and panel shows such as the Gruen Transfer, and is also a radio host, and she's chair of the Bell Shakespeare's Artistic Advisory Panel and on the boards of the Bell Shakespeare and New South Wales Public Education Foundation. And she's also a beef and timber grower. And she's going to speak on why I support end-of-life choices.
Yes, if only I knew what I wanted to do when I grew up. It would be good. It's been quite an interesting few days for me, because some of you may have seen that my mother and I graced the front page of the Sun Herald on Sunday with a rather awful headline that neither of us had actually said. And the headline said something like, "Let my daughter help me die." And there were a number of people who immediately panicked and felt that there was something awful wrong with my mother. So I feel that I need to publicly reassure everyone that at 80, she's as feisty, fierce and fit as she ever has been. And I'm very glad to say that. So I'm not speaking to you about personal experience, not yet. I'm speaking to you as an ordinary citizen with no particular expertise in this area at all. But I think there's one thing that we're all going to have to do. We're all going to have to die. So it seems to me that we all have the right to have some sort of opinion about this. And this is mine. To die peacefully in our beds after a short and dignified decline at a grand old age, surrounded by the people we love, is the end we all hope for. Unfortunately, if statistics are anything to go by, the vast majority of us are in the grip of a mass delusion. Few people die this way. Most of us die in hospital beds surrounded by tubes, masks and monitors. One of the things that happened to me as a result of becoming the sort of surprised poster girl for voluntary assisted suicide, I'll use that term, this week, is that some people who I haven't seen for a long time contacted me, and one of them was an old school friend who now works in palliative care. And one of the things he said to me was that dying at home has now become something for the resource rich. Kind of interesting, isn't it? Private school at the beginning of life, dying at home at the end of it. As medical science improves exponentially, life expectancy continues its relentless march upwards, which would of course be unequivocally a good thing if our quality of life also kept pace. But unfortunately, the longer we live, the greater our chances of getting age-related diseases. To Mike's extremely moving story, I went and Googled a few statistics and found that Alzheimer's Disease International forecasts that the number of Alzheimer's sufferers will double to 66 million people worldwide in the next 20 years. It's already gone up 10% in the last 5. So it is increasing at an ever galloping rate, simply because we're living so much longer. Few diseases are regarded with more dread, I think, than Alzheimer's. Once the old man's friend, you remember that's what we used to call pneumonia, would see the frail off relatively mercifully. Not very often now. Now we struggle on, technically alive, but not really living. Palliative care is also improving, and this can only be seen as a positive. Unfortunately, according to my friend who works in palliative care, it is not getting anything like the funding that it requires, and in fact there's a huge shortage of palliative care medical specialists, and the need for more numbers are not being met by by shortages in training. So we have what, if you like, a perfect nexus. We have the opponents of voluntary assisted suicide often talk about palliative care being the way to go, and yet when I speak to someone who's extremely involved in this, his point of view is that there is very little funding going towards it, and it is simply not able to keep up with what's going on. So we are not given the right to die, and it looks like we're not given much help along the way, an awful lot of us either. Pain that was once unmanageable can now be controlled, but not always, and diseases with terrible prognoses like motor neurone, which has already come up today, can strike terror into anyone's heart. I will never forget an episode of Q&A. It's from a couple of years ago when this issue came up, and there was a video question was asked about a young woman who had a terminal disease which had got to the stage where she was vomiting her own faeces. She begged the politicians on the panel for the right to die. One politician, who will remain nameless, said the whole idea of euthanasia made her feel queasy. I remember wondering what vomiting her own faeces might make the politician feel. Sometimes when I hear people in positions of power who can do something about this talk about this issue, not all of them of course, but some of them, there is an extraordinary lack of compassion for people who are actually suffering terribly now. It's not theoretical. And it doesn't seem to me okay to say, well, I find it a bit icky, don't want to talk about it, so could you please go away and take your suffering somewhere else? I don't see that as a particularly, shall I say, Christian response. Of course, voluntary euthanasia does make most of us feel uneasy. Our attitude to death these days seems very like the attitude the Victorians had towards sex. We know it's there, but we don't like to think about it, much less talk about it, and deal with it openly and honestly. It's taboo, swept under the carpet, the business of medicos, behind the plastic doors of the intensive care ward, for most of us, or the palliative care ward, if apparently we're quite lucky. When we begin the business of dying, we often enter a strange and artificial world and leave all that is familiar to us behind. Despite the very best of intentions, many of us die bewildered, uncomfortable, if not actually in pain, in a strange environment amongst strangers. This is not good. We've become much more civilised about birth. We used to ask women to give birth in that kind of bizarre, lonely situation. I've heard some horror stories of women only 10 or 20 years older than me, one who was actually slapped across the face as she moaned in labour as an 18-year-old in a labour ward, and was told by the nun she'd made her bed and so now she was lying in it. Compassion is a wonderful thing. But now we've made birth, really, one couldn't call it enjoyable, though I had the drugs. That helped a lot. But we have friends, we have music, we have our husband, we have support, we can talk about it. It is no longer strange or in a strange place. But death, the other end of life, no. It remains this weird, lonely, cut off part of our lives. No wonder the vast majority of Australians support the idea of voluntary euthanasia. Many who have spoken to me on the subject have talked about elderly parents starving themselves to death. It seems to be a common response to unbearable, ongoing life, turning their face to the wall or becoming lost in a terrifying world of their own diseased brains making, no longer knowing who they are, where they are, and unable to recognise once familiar faces and so receive any comfort. Amongst the elderly, support for the right to die in their own way is even greater than among the rest of us. Go to any debate or forum on the subject. Indeed, look around you. And the audience is full of grey heads. This issue may be theoretical, we earnestly hope, to younger people, but it is often stark reality to the old. Paradoxically, I believe, the more control we give people over the end of their life, the less necessary they may in fact find it to exercise that right. because control lessens fear. And the thought you can decide for yourself when your suffering gets too great to bear may just encourage you to go on a little bit longer. There's the phenomenon now that when people have operations, they can give themselves the dose of morphine. In the hospital, you get a little pump pack and you can give it to yourself. And one of the things they've discovered, I believe, is that when they allow people to have control over the pain relief themselves, they use less morphine. Because they think, well, it's here, I can use it at any time, therefore I'll wait until the pain gets really bad. Whereas when you had to ring for the nurse and wait, you did it a bit early because she might be slow. One of the more frightening responses I've had to this topic is the number of people who have confided that they or their parents have a plan. They mean a plan to commit suicide, as it's already been spoken about, often much earlier than they might otherwise feel necessary. Of course, there are many legislative difficulties and hurdles to overcome. Of course there are. Like Mike, I'm not a legislator. I'm not going to try and lecture you on the law. Safeguards are vital and must be robust to make sure that no one's exploited. But we have models. The Netherlands, Belgium, Albania, Luxembourg, Switzerland, Oregon, Washington and Montana all have some form of legal euthanasia. And unscrupulous families, which is always brought up, people have terrible fear of the number of unscrupulous relatives there are out in the community, apparently, just plotting for their elderly parents to die. Unscrupulous families will not be able to decide to bump off an elderly relative for gain or convenience. Murder is illegal now and will remain illegal. That would be murder. This intimate and personal decision must remain between the person involved, their doctor and their family. We used to divide the world. I've been trying to put this into context and also think, why am I passionate about it? We used to divide the world into left and right, sort of economically driven divisions based on capital and labour. Now I believe we're moving into a new era of division between the authoritarians and the small L liberals. And I think that that's at the essence of this particular discussion. There are a group of people in our society, many of them with strong religious convictions, but not all, who want to hold on to control. They want to keep control in the hands of what they see as authority, whoever that might be. But I think they're losing their grip slowly. If we look at the internet, social media, what's happening across the world really, if we look at things like the Arab Spring, even dictators are losing their grip on control, on being the gatekeepers. More and more ordinary people are able to exercise much more control. They have the liberty to decide how their own lives will go and will turn out. The fight we're having is a fight about authoritarians and small L liberalism. Who decides? That's what it's about. With an ageing population and the ever-increasing ability of medical science to prolong life, and that's not going to get any less, I can't see in the future, this is an issue that will not be swept aside much longer. We need a grey-haired spring. And we need to keep talking about it right now. Thank you for asking me to talk.